Welcome to Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff, where we interview newsmakers, storytellers, and all-around interesting people. Sit back, relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy the show. Here's Jackson.
Hello. I am Jackson Huff. This is Not in a Huff. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, really appreciate it. This week I'm interviewing Duane Scott Cerny. Now, Duane's an awesome guy. He deals on something that I am very interested in myself. You know, I often get people that just have interesting stories that I don't know a ton about that topic, and we learn together. You know, occasionally I talk to people that are in something I know a lot about, board games one time, those type of things. Duane is a vintage antique dealer. Now, obviously, I am nowhere near that, but I definitely am very into going to the antique malls, getting into ephemera, which he's going to teach us about what that word means, but I didn't even know that was something I was already collecting. Big into that. So, obviously, it was a conversation that I knew a lot about already and was extremely fascinated to hear from him. He sent me his 2 books that he has written, Selling Dead People's Things and Vintage Confidential. Before the interview, I power read that first Selling Dead People's Things books in, 3 days. So that just shows that it was a really interesting, fun book, and I think you would enjoy that too. But I'm giving you all of this to tell you this is a longer interview. Last week was a short interview. You know, if you set aside a certain amount of time every week to listen to this podcast, well, I'd like to use some of my rollover time from last week when it was a short podcast, because this one is longer than an hour. Try to keep them under an hour. If it doesn't happen, I'm not going to worry so much about it happening every time, because I don't want to cut good content for you. And I do think you're going to enjoy this one. Duane's such an awesome guy. He's going to teach you about what it's like to be a vintage dealer, going into estate sales, buying from eccentric people, some of the coolest things he has found in his 20 plus years buying things, some of the weirdest things that he has bought, some of the craziest collections that he has bought from and bought for. I think that you're going to enjoy this one immensely. I certainly did. We had a fantastic chat, and that's why it kept rolling. You know, he was willing to keep talking, and I was willing to keep asking. So I do think you're going to enjoy this one. I'm going to keep this intro short because it's a long episode. So without further ado, here is Duane Scott Cerny. I'm here today with Duane Scott Cerny. Mr. Cerny, how are you?
I am good.
Introduce yourself if you would. A little bit.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'm an antique dealer. I'm an author. I guess I'm a humorist if you find me funny, and otherwise not.
Well, I was telling you before, I read your first book in its entirety, really, really enjoyed it, and I definitely do find you funny. I laughed out loud several times, so I liked it a lot. We're going to talk about, your world of antiquing. I don't even know what are you an antique dealer? Is that what you called yourself?
I think most people these days call themselves vintage dealers.
Vintage dealers.
Yeah.
So you started at a really young age when it comes to this. Talk a little bit about, your quest for the resale and the porch store and all that.
We're going to go that far back. Yeah. Well, that was a kid. I had just, I think I had a paper route for about a week, and I realized this is way too much work. So basically what I did was I started a consignment store on my parents' concrete porch, and I called it the porch store. But then I said all I would end up was having adults drive by and ask if I could recommend a good aluminum cider, or somebody to do their roofing. So there was totally misbranded. I didn't get that. But I would just go around the neighborhood and ask kids what toys aren't you playing with? And inevitably they'd give me something, and I'd either sell it or trade. And I did that for like a summer. And I don't even know where I came up with that idea, because my parents weren't thrifters at all. my mother was like, Sears Roebuck. Everything had to come from Sears Roebuck. I think I came from Sears Roebuck because everybody in the family worked for Sears.
Yeah.
And then in high school, I actually started a little side business there. We'll talk about that briefly or get kicked off the air. Selling Playboy magazines. Because I remembered that I realized that, my fellow classmates, that was back then, that was quite the thing to score a copy of Playboy magazine. And coincidentally, my father worked for basically like a subsidiary of Playboy. So I recognized the value of the desire, if not the interest. I think I detail in the book exactly how I got into that, which was rather curious, but it was basically a way to manipulate people, I realized, to make some extra money. And again, being a busboy in a restaurant, that was really hard work. So this was easier. So it's kind of the taste of self-employment as a youth.
Yeah, and I thought it was so interesting that it had started so long ago, and that you're still kind of in that same mindset and flipping things. And I thought it was really cool for sure, because obviously you have scoured all kinds of places and gotten a lot of really interesting things I'm sure you're not really actually interested in, but to know what other people's desires are, just like those Playboy magazines, maybe those you weren't necessarily interested in that, but you knew a lot of other people are. So that you've kept kind of that skill, and that's probably what's made you so successful.
That's a good point. I don't think anyone's ever said that before. Yeah. I mean, and even to this day, because people are always asking me, what kind of like what's hot, what's not, or when somebody's trying to sell me something that just doesn't really sell well now. And I've kind of realized that I often refer to it that the vintage market is very much a fashion. So not that we do sell fashions, but that there are trends. In that, like, I mean, I've lived long enough to who would have thought that vinyl would come back is a good example, right? And I mean, there was a time not so long ago where you couldn't give that away. I mean, once it had gone, the internet had come along, and vinyl. And now there are actually new record stores. There's new record labels. I've never in a million years would I have guessed that. However, that's an area, vintage vinyl, that has legs. That is a market that isn't going anywhere except up. Whereas, let's just say every rare once in a while somebody comes in and asks for an 8-track, right? And an 8-track or an 8-track player, and it becomes almost like a dead technology. Recognizing what people are interested in and following it. And also I'm in the Midwest, which is always, sometimes really more just like a few months behind. I would say, again, before the internet, I'd say almost like a year or two behind, a trend, but now it's before they catch on to something. And not that the Midwest, that we don't have our own trends. In my second book, which has come out, I think you've heard about, which is the Vintage Confidential, and I write about music in general as a chapter in there, and it was like house music. Well, house music started in Chicago, and then became a whole global thing. And strangely, I was in on the beginning of that. I don't exactly know how, but I just kind of stumbled onto it. So to your point, I think it's kind of just listening to what, paying attention to what people want.
What you said about the vinyl thing, that's definitely resonates with me, because I'm definitely into vinyl. And I don't know, like 10 years ago, I bought vinyl records, honestly, just to hang up on my walls. It was something cheap that I just posted to my walls. And back then at the Goodwill, I would find Queen, Rolling Stones, Beatles, all these things. Now that I've gotten back into it and actually listening to it, find that at Goodwill. Yeah, right. You're going to find Lawrence Welk and all that kind of stuff. So right. Yeah, it's hugely like that. I get that for sure. And I want to kind of talk, before we get into your books, I want you to highlight your, I guess, your stores, because I mean, you do have a platform there that you're selling most of these things. I think you went from wham to bam, right?
I went from wham to bam. Yeah, I went from Wrigleyville Antique Mall, which was near Wrigley Field, to Broadway Antique Market, which is up in Chicago's Edgewater neighborhood.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about the stores. I know it's the oldest and largest in Chicago. Is that right?
Yeah, the largest like multi-dealer store. So it's 20,000 square feet on 2 floors. So it's rather so it's 6130 North Broadway. BAM Chicago.com. And yeah, we opened up in 1998. We moved, of course, and into an old Art Deco furniture store. And so it was like perfect for our needs. And the second floor had been closed for like 20 years. And the building had been all kinds of things. It was crazy. Again, built as a furniture store, and they actually manufactured furniture there and sold it. And then it was a used car dealership because they had a concrete floor. It was they made hats upstairs in a sweatshop, which was called One Touch of Glamour, which I think is the funniest thing. Just a touch of glamour. You don't want too much glamour. Right. Could go over the top there. I think it was an art gallery. I mean, it's just been everything. But for us, it's to bring it back to what originally was, built as a furniture store. It's perfect. So, and it looks like it fell out of South Beach. It's just Art Deco.
For sure. And I mean, I'm not too far from you. I'm in Indiana. It's definitely made me want to go check out your store for sure. I'm going to kind of leave it to people actually to read the book, but you asked me beforehand some of my favorite parts of the book. I definitely like the part where you finally get to pay off that store and tell the banker exactly what's happening.
Yeah. That got kind of messy. I'm sure we've all have banker stories. Yeah. How could you make that interesting, right? Well,
you certainly do. I like it. Yeah. And let's kind of get to, you say it early in the book, and I think that it's a really powerful thing. I talked to somebody last week that's in the world of like funeral homes and funeral directing, and she kind of ties it into food and how food is nostalgia and people remember people by food. But your kind of topic is people kind of are their things. They're a collection of their things. And that's kind of, you can go in somebody's house. That's what you do a lot of times. And you can kind of piece together who that person is. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's kind of like I'll have to listen because that sounds fascinating with the mortician and food. Yeah, you end up being a bit of a detective. I mean, sometimes I don't just buy things from dead people or estates. Sometimes they're actually physically above ground and can talk to me. But when they're not, and there's been a lot of interesting situations, you just kind of have to figure it all out as you go. So to me, it's not always about just buying the stuff and making money. I'm often interested in the person, but I mean, I venture to guess, even like you were just talking about, if I came to your house and I see vinyl up on the wall or framed, or I could you get a feel for what somebody's into and what they collect, and it can be some pretty peculiar things that people collect and why they collect them. I mean, there's the whole notion of that people buy back their childhood. Once you got a little money and you go like, oh, that thing I didn't get it as a kid, I can now buy for myself, and then you end up with somebody who has, 300 transistor radios or fill in the blank. Younger people really like owls. Really don't have any explanation for that. From the 70s, especially, and we'll sell everyone we can get our hands on. So again, there are these kind of trends that'll come along, and then there's a similarity of people collecting that that same thing.
I know some owl people myself, so I hear you there. Another thing, kind of early in the book too, you talk about, which makes total sense just in the society that we're in, and we like to dive into other people's drama, and the fact that bad news sells a lot better sometimes than good news. Talk a little bit about that. And I think early on you realized that, what was it, JFK's assassination was something that was going to sell pretty well for you.
Yeah, well, that was just kind of and it kind of tied into the Playboy because I was a kid. Yeah, I was 4 on that. But as you went along, it would be going to your friends' parents their basement, and inevitably they had newspapers for the assassinations. Just like it's just something that people collected. And to this day, I'll go into people's homes, and they can be just in the worst shape. I mean, you can look at it; it doesn't even look like a newspaper anymore. It's like the dog got to it, right? And then they think it's of value, and of course, it's they printed millions of copies. It was the story of what the century, right? But rarer papers that came out that said that JFK was wounded and not killed. That was the first story they ran with. So those are worth more than the ones that you find that you see that he's killed. So many people think they have the mother lode because they have a copy of a newspaper that they've made millions of copies of. Yeah, it's actually kind of the same thing in rarity. I always say about when somebody will come in with a copy of Thriller, right? Michael Jackson's Thriller. I said they sold 50 million of these. How much could it possibly be worth, right? I mean, think about it. Back to vinyl. You want a band that went nowhere. You want a band that just didn't hit. They made 1,500 copies, and that was it. Those are things of value. That's what makes things scarce and rare. So it's kind of simple if you think about it, but
yeah, it does make sense. But then at the same time, I feel like, I mean, it makes sense. The vinyl that I have that's worth the most amount of money is one that they made 500 copies of. It's this street musician from New Orleans that was, I don't know if he's homeless or what, but that's the one that's worth the most money because they didn't make much of it.
That's right. There you go.
eBay. I want to talk about eBay, and I want to talk about the internet. It's been around for 30, 40 years now. So I'm sure the market has kind of adjusted and gotten used to it. But talk about the effect back in the early days that eBay, the internet had, because obviously back then, before that, when you saw something, it's either get it now or who knows whether you're going to see it again. Now people can just click and see if they can find 10 more of them online. So what's that done? Has it made things cheaper? Has it made things just more accessible and easier? Or what's it like?
I think the latter. It certainly made it more accessible and easier. And I refer to it as kind of like the leveler. I mean, I'm sure you could like look up something that you own and you'll say, well, that guy's insane. I mean, are you on drugs? I mean, where did you come up with that price that people put just and they didn't do any research. They just put it out there and they're hoping, I don't know, some idiot comes along. So I see a lot of that. I'm sure you see a lot of that. You go, what are they thinking? Right. So I think it points out the fools. I actually had a gentleman contact me, a week or so ago, and I had these glass plate negative slides that they put up in movie theaters between silent films or a silent film that was going to be coming up. They didn't have a trailer for it. They would just have a slide, and they would so they're rare, but they're not that rare. And I had a bunch of them, and I sold most of them, and I had one left. And the guy contacted me, and he says, well, you have $25 on yours, but there's another guy who has the same one, and it's $35. Why is his $35? And I said, why are you asking me that? I don't know. It's just mine's 25. So people are funny, and I did sell it to him. I think he just realized, oh well, it's the same one. If the condition is there, always have to go with that. The cheaper one is better. Though people are funny, and sometimes they think if they pay more, they're getting a better one, and not necessarily. I mean, you just have to ask your questions. My business partner always says that eBay started with all the hobbyists, and by this point, most of them are like dead and gone, or I don't know, they've gone on to other platforms. I don't want to knock any other platforms, but there's certainly so many other places to sell. It's very niche. If you want to sell on Etsy or whatever. But I think it's leveled off the prices. I think the novelty of eBay initially, it kind of went both ways. If you were on it in the beginning, and I wasn't because I was opening up stores, foolish me, people made a killing because they'd be like, I've never seen a penguin ice bucket before, even though it's the most ubiquitous item that could possibly be out there. Something very simple, and people would totally overpay. So the people who were selling made a lot of money, just crazy prices. And and it did have an effect on those who had brick and mortar. Now, I don't feel it does at all. It's just another place. Again, everybody's got a computer in their pocket, right? So you can be in a store and look up something. But when you're in a store, you can actually physically look at the condition, and we go back to that, right? Mm-hmm. And like paper, it's all about condition. Vinyl, we're talking about that. Ephemera, it's all about the condition. But that's also said for if you're buying a piece of glass or pottery, or are you gonna see a hairline crack on something online if the seller didn't even catch it, and they may not have. Or in a store, you could physically see that. So I don't think like that's ever going to change. There seems to be almost an appreciation for the stores that have survived, especially kind of post COVID, since that wiped out a lot of retail went. But the ones that came through it, I think they were in some respects kind of, the more resilient of business people. And customers appreciate that. I think we're more appreciated now than ever just because we're still here.
No, I think there's something definitely to be said to have that tangible item in your hand. I mean, I've bought a few vinyls online, but I don't like that at all. I like to have it in front of me before I buy it. So I understand that. And I just wonder, you're talking about leveling. Does it ever allow you to level it the opposite way, like you're saying? I teach some business classes, and my big example always is when I was a kid, I opened up a vegetable stand. My parents had a garden, and it was just success. There was too much, and I put out free vegetables. Anybody wants vegetables, come take them. Nobody stopped. And then when I started putting prices on them, people stopped, because people think, oh, when you actually have to pay for something, or when something's more expensive, just like you were saying, it's better. It's better. So do you ever see you're going to price something at $25, and you see, okay, everyone online is selling it for $35. Maybe I should sell mine for $35 if everyone else is getting it. Does it ever allow you to level it the other way?
I think I'm influenced by the pricing of others. Yeah. It'd be silly not to, only because I'd say, I know a little bit about a lot, but I don't know a lot about much. Paraphrase that. So, and I can especially if it's something rather obscure, I'm going to say, I don't know, a cigar cutter. I'll pull that out, going like, there's something I don't know anything about. But I'll know it's a cigar cutter, and it looks early, and it's 19th century or something. And then I'll go out and look at different, and always recommend this for people too. I'm sure you do this yourself. Look at closed auctions, not what people are selling,
right?
Asking, not all the craziness. What does something like this actually sell for? And if you can find it, if you can't find it, it's either really good or really bad. You can't find it. Maybe those don't sell for some reason because they made so many of them, or you find it and then it could be worth some money. But I think I have, just like anybody else, I'm a newbie. I would be a newbie to being a seller on that, and I would say, oh, these are worth $50. I'll put mine out for 45.
All these collections you go through, all these collections you're trying to help people complete, because I know that you do some of that too. Do you collect anything? What do you collect? Or is it kind of like the old, what is that, drug dealer saying you don't buy your own product? Do you not get into it?
Well, the store sells a tremendous amount of mid-century modern, so very Mad Men looking, from furniture and art and accessories and all that. And when you sell it all day, it's like people own restaurants. Right,
that may be a better one than the drug dealer part. But
drug dealer. But yeah, you don't use your own product. That's good advice, though. I think it's so I don't collect that, though. I mean, other mid-century modern dealers absolutely do. I like the earlier stuff. I like deco things and streamline modern and machine age things. I like photography, cabinet cards and CDVs and things like that. But even online, into what you were talking about earlier, there's as soon as people realized they could, the quality of printing to create reproductions became much simpler for the masses. And so, that started with, like, just say baseball cards. So people started knocking off baseball cards. And I'm like, well, that's okay because I don't sell baseball cards. But then they started doing that with images, and that kind of spooked me, and I stopped. So I'll still buy an image if I stumble on it at a market and I can look at it, or in somebody's house. But again, to your point with the internet, I'm much more hesitant, because if you want to send it back, it's just a hassle. And I know as a seller, I don't like returns. I want to have clean deals. I want people to be happy, So, I collect a lot of unusual things for me. I like exploitation posters. So I'd say kind of in the John Waters vein of odd. Again, something that they wouldn't have made a lot of, and they really weren't intended to last that long. Movie poster for like a shotgun wedding, or as a matter of fact, I've heard John Waters speak a couple times, and whenever he mentions something I've never heard of, I'm scribbling it down. Example, I've got a copy of Mom and Dad. So Mom and Dad was one of those hygiene films. If you ever hear that.
I don't think so.
So it was, this would be in the late 40s, early 50s. And they'd come into town with this. It's called Mom and Dad. And it would show the birth of a baby. So here's the gimmick is that the first showing would be at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And they'd have women. It would be just for women. Only women would be allowed to see this. And so it was billed as more like this clinical film, right? And then the 7 or 8 o'clock showing would be it was men only. And then it was shown as a dirty movie, as if giving birth could be somehow sexualized. But I didn't make this movie. It's one of the most profitable films ever made. And they just went from town to town with this. So, and I'd never heard of another film that would have, I don't say segregated, but separated audiences like that. Crazy idea, but they made a fortune on that. So as soon as I heard about that, I gotta find a copy of that. So like yourself, I'm sure you have something that you've always looked for. You're kind of on the hunt, But then once you find it, you're happy you find it. But it's like, well, it scratches the itch for a moment, and then you're on to the next thing.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of what I've found because I don't know, I've collected darn near everything in my life, I feel like. And I feel like I've gotten to a point now where, like, with vinyl is one thing, and then old board games, I like those two things. And I've realized what makes me like these things now is that I can still interact with them. Obviously, all these other things that I've collected in my time, okay, I finally got it, and I'll just put it on the shelf, and now I've forgotten about it, and I'm not enjoying it anymore. So be able to keep on, using it, keep on interacting with it, I feel like makes it more pleasurable. And I always like to try to find something in my interview to show my incompetence. What is you say the word quite a few times in the book, and I think that's kind of what you collect too. What's this word? How do you pronounce this word that's just like paper stuff?
Ephemera.
What is it?
Ephemera.
Ephemera.
Ephemera. EPHEMURA. Ephemera.
I don't feel too bad then. I thought you were going to say a word like, oh, I've heard that before. I just didn't know how it was spelled. No, I don't think I've ever heard that word before.
Yeah, that's a kind of, paper dealers are ephemera dealers.
I gotcha.
I didn't make up that word or anything.
Really?
No. I like that word though, because that kind of, to some people, you say paper dealers, and then they go,
right.
What do you mean by that? But it's a fun word.
No, it is. I think that's a cool catch-all word, because I feel like I like that kind of stuff too, like old tickets and programs and that kind of stuff. So
you collect it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I didn't even know it. I don't know if I'll be able to say what I collect, but I do sometimes. Yeah. So if you would, because this book is kind of and the book I'm talking about, the one that I've read, I want you to tell us more about the other one too. But the book that I've read is Selling Dead People's Things. That's the name, correct?
It's the name of the book. Yes.
And it's kind of a collection of a lot of different stories from your time, all these years in being a vintage dealer. If you would, obviously, I don't want you to, give away $2.99 of the book, but give us a story or two that people are going to find in these books. Happy to tell you some of the ones that I thought were interesting, but I'd be more interested to know kind of the ones that you enjoyed the most in writing or experiencing.
Well, I love getting feedback from it because it's. I'm going to kind of back it up a little bit and say, wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what I was writing, and I thought on one hand I was kind of writing a business book about how to. It's not a how-to. I always want to be very specific with people so they don't think they're not buying something. Go, I didn't learn anything. And so isn't it's selling dead people's things. It's my selling dead people's things. So my experience in doing that. So and having stores. So half of the book is that, and then the other half are basically the stories, some of the more unusual stories of things that I kind of stumbled into. And this particular book has a bit of a paranormal bent because these things have happened and happened to me and to others. And I thought, let's just put them in one title and kind of then get them out of the way. So I want people to realize it's not like, like every other place I walk into is haunted or haunted dolls and things like that. And it's not. That's not. I have been in some odd places. One of my favorite is there's the Edgewater Hospital story, and that's now been turned into condos. But we were there when it had closed, and it's just this enormous hospital that was originally a very upscale hotel and then remodeled into a hospital. And that was a very creepy place to be. I'll just leave it. I'll just kind of leave it at there. There's another story, and I like stories that kind of have an O. Henry ending if there naturally is one. So I'd say by in the top three, readers tell me they love the story about the little old lady who just lived in 3 rooms.
I love
That's
that one, yeah.
one of their favorite stories. And it was to me too, going like, whoa, a story that just kind of blows me away while I'm there. The story about Jacob Marley. So, which was a gentleman I was friends with, and there was a store called Jacob Marley, and everyone thought his name was Jacob Marley, and we go, well, no, from the Christmas Carol, it couldn't possibly. His name was Jacob Marley. Well, it could have been, but it wasn't. And he was a florist, and then got into the antique business, and he would just have the best stuff. So just like religious things and sterling and jewelry and photographs, ephemera. He was a big ephemera dealer, but everything would be displayed like in branches of trees and under apothecary domes. So before everybody got into like the whole oddity thing, this guy was doing it. And when people would come in and they'd say, oh, I want to speak to Mr. Marley. And he'd say, oh, well, Mr. Marley's not presently in, but I can help you. So the guy created this retail facade and then sold behind it successfully for years. He is one of the first people to introduce like selling mid-century modern, turned it into a show here in Chicago, which was a big deal. Celebrities would come in from LA and New York to shop this show. I mean, he put it on the map. His name was Tom Neneskis, was his real name. And we became friends. He moved in right next to us, and he passed. And what I realized from it, though, was that, and this was at the height of the AIDS crisis, was that, there were Jacob Marleys in every city around the world. If you hold with that thought, in that somebody created a store that was really important to thousands of people. And this is how they decorated their homes and bought gifts for their, wives and girlfriends and husbands. And then they die and it's gone. And so people always talk about just the great loss of creativity from AIDS, but very little is ever written about the retail part of it. That existed, because I guarantee you go to LA or Houston or any town in the world, and people would have their favorite store, and then that guy dies and it's gone. And that's kind of what got me about it, was I realized that my own little personal experience here was much, much, much bigger, and that I wanted to write about people like that. It's important. He was important. So so going back to like one of my favorite stories, it goes back to the person and then and their things.
Right. No, I enjoyed that story a lot. And I'm just trying to kind of tie things together. It's kind of I don't know, it's a strange question, but you said that a lot of, during the heightened of the AIDS crisis, that a lot of people, all these stores across the country had lost their lives. I feel like, are you saying that a lot of people that were in this business maybe are I don't know. Is it more of a business to a lot of people that I guess at that time were getting AIDS, or was it more of a homosexual world?
No, there's a lot of gay antique dealers because a lot of gay vintage dealers now more than ever, and there always have been. There always have been, and I think it maybe it addresses to that going like maybe even from years ago where it was harder for people to get a job and to keep a job. Maybe just say someone was like naturally kind of effeminate, and then it would be hard for them. But they could open up a little store and do their own thing and make a living. So, but it's just like it's like the arts. I mean, like why were there so many people who died who were in the arts? Well, because they were gay. And so that's why it affected Broadway and things like that. But you can go down into, it's screenwriters, just a lot of creative people. Gay people tend to be, not that straight people aren't creative. I don't mean that. My point always is just that it's like you had a favorite place. Like, let's say, it didn't affect the restaurant industry the same way. Let's put it that way. And not that there aren't gay restaurateurs, but it just didn't. So, and that's what I found unusual about it. I'm always looking for what is a part of this story that's unusual. And again, it wasn't just the United States. People would be that was their favorite store in London, their favorite store in Paris. And I would hear about these stores, and they would just be, oh my gosh, the stuff this person, sells. And people, to this day, you say, where did you get that? Oh, well, do you remember so and so? This was in his store. Mm-hmm. That's a story that goes on because of an object. Mm-hmm. There's no story from anything that you or I bought from IKEA.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that a lot. Honestly, just in transparency, the minute I asked that question, I thought that's a weird question. I'm gonna cut that all out. But then your response and just to think about why that may be the case and discrimination that had happened in the past. Obviously, this is a world where you're able to, become an entrepreneur and do your own thing. Makes total sense. So you've taken a weird question and made it a really cool one.
Oh, that was a great question. That was a great question. It's an important question.
Right.
Sure. Better than great. And it's an important question because then we just kind of better understand these things too. I love the fact that, younger people, and I'm going to say, now in their 20s or whatever, they don't necessarily identify as anything. Right. And that's not me. Fine. But that's wonderful because it's just that, because like their parents were cool with it. They don't have like a coming out story. What's the coming out story? But I think it's important too, is that how times have changed, and we can look at things with a perspective, and vintage is very much history. Why you collect those things is because you're interested in history.
I love that for sure. And just to kind of for your own benefit, the stories that I enjoyed all of them, but the ones that I had written down, I liked anytime that you were dealing with, I think is Hayroth. I really enjoyed hearing about him. I enjoyed the incubator baby story. That was super cool. The beekeeper apartment was cool. I guess Hayroth's wife, Marilyn, and the dog and the bird that you had taken in, really, really awesome. And then I feel like the one that was maybe the coolest was towards the end. And it's, the lady, I guess you probably didn't even buy the thing, but the program from the fire with the theater was super awesome.
From the Iroquois Theater. Yeah. Right. She wouldn't, that's a story where somebody wouldn't sell me something and then, but has to tell me why she won't sell it. Thank you. I'd forgotten about that one. That's one of my personal favorites. Hopefully we're whetting everybody's appetites to take a Selling Dead People's Things read. Oh, and I just finished the audiobook on that, and that is now available on Audible.
I like it. We talked about the internet earlier. Talk about what, I guess, reality TV in this world has done to the profession. I feel like I'm sure I always ask questions, then I try to answer them myself, but I feel like I'm sure it's turned a lot of people into thinking that, they can do this easily, that it's not a hard thing to do. And then also makes people think that every storage shed or every house is going to have amazing treasures at this point. So talk about reality shows and the effect.
Sure. I think when you start with Antique Roadshow, because that's really what started it all, and Leave It to the Brits to do it much better. like so many things that Americans, and we'll just like rip them off and let's see if ours works. So that's a real show with real experts, and I love it, and it's been on forever. And I think what that did is it triggered a whole interest in all this stuff, right? And then people say, well, I don't have that particular, I don't know, milk jug or whatever, but grandma had this one, and, go run into the basement, see if we still have it. I wonder if that's worth anything. And you get on your computer and start looking up and see if it's on eBay. So it starts there, and you go, well, that's just great. And then you can go to the American Road Show, which again, legitimate, vetted is a good word. I like that word a lot, vetted. So they're not letting any goofballs on there. I probably would not be on that show. Let's put it that way. For that reason. After that, it's like open season. I'll make comments like this. We've been asked to, because we prop TV shows and films, and have for what you read the book, have for 25 some years. Well, we've been asked to prop storage locker shows. Oh. So do I even have to finish the thought? Right. What, right? So, and I always go like, is that staged? Now, are some of them real? Perhaps, with a small p. But I know from my experience of just being that, and we didn't, of course they wouldn't do that. I wouldn't, that's not a way, I don't need to make money that badly. That's just fooling people. So no. Pawn Stars is based on a real pawn shop in Las Vegas. And I think now they film it in a set that looks like the shop. I think that's how they do it, and they bring out experts, and I think that's I believe that to be legitimate, and after that, I probably said enough. Yeah. So it's reality TV. What part of it is real? I mean, a lot of things are just. I'm what I always hear is just like, there's still a director, and there's still sort of a script, and okay, say that line again and say that line again and say, well, here, you and I aren't having that kind of a conversation. This is much more real. What we're talking right now, than reality TV. So I know that people aren't stupid. So I think that people enjoy it, and I think they kind of accept it for what it's worth. I mean, I love Hoarders. It's great. It's just a great show. Probably some of that is staged. There has to be. There's already a camera in the house. How did that happen, right? But I'm in hoarder homes, and my favorite are, there's hoarders, and then there's upscale hoarders. And the upscale hoarders, if you think about it, is somebody who's a hoarder, but they have money, and then they could just buy whatever they want. Well, let me tell you, that's the house you want to get into, because there's going to be some great stuff. You're going to still be dealing with someone who doesn't want to part with a bottle cap, and the other, I'm not making fun of anyone with, such mental issues. That's still kind of sad, you can see. But I get it. I totally get it, because it's that nature of collecting. And I just, the other thing I think, and to kind of wrap this up for you, is that almost every third or fourth episode of Hoarders, they're in the thrift store. They're going to a thrift store. Even if they thrown away or given away everything, they're back at the thrift store because they have to buy. They have to find something else. That's the addiction there, is people shopping. And that's kind of it's kind of sad, because I really, I see that in real life. And then that's a real trend. They could have a show just on that. But to me, it's sad, because you're just following someone who's around who, has some mental issues.
The reality show thing, it is kind of almost crazy to hear that you've been asked to prop some of those shows. So yeah, I mean, I've talked to a ton of people from various reality shows. I just like to hear the behind the scenes and how true some things are. So the big thing I feel like, and people realize, is these shows have, they're trying to entertain people. They're trying to put a product on that people want to see. And if it's just a bunch of junk that nobody cares about, then no one's going to watch it. So that makes sense for sure. You talk about hoarding and collecting. To you, because obviously it may be subjective to a point, and then sometimes it's not. But how do you determine what you think a hoarder is versus somebody with just a very extensive collection?
Okay, if you can't have people over,
yeah,
I think that's about it, because absolutely been in places where you got to wear, space boots and gloves. And, we were wearing masks before COVID. I know people who aren't in the business anymore because of just mold of finding stuff in the basements, and you're not thinking about it, So, yeah, that's my go-to answer, is that you just can't have anybody over because you're embarrassed. It smells bad. There's no place to sit.
And yeah, the whole, if you can't have people over, that makes sense. I feel like if you had a cat 3 years ago, and I haven't seen it since, you probably have some problems still.
I often say that this is a business where you have to be a bit of a social worker and a bit of a clergyman, and a decent human being, and your check should be good. I think if you got those 4 things, you're probably fine, because sometimes people aren't ready to sell things. That Iroquois theater story, I pine after that. Going like, and also, what the heck happened to that thing? Like, if I got it, I know I'm going to sell it to another collector, or maybe I'm going to sell it to a museum and it's going to be preserved. It's back in her drawer, right? And then the next person or somebody comes in there, which after she passes, they even know what it was, and out it goes. So it's lost. So, and sometimes I almost think it's like I feel like I'm saving a kitten. We'll go back to the cat smell, but yeah. And I get that feeling too, because it's just like, otherwise, because look around here, or she's 85. Where's it going? I never go and like talk anybody out of like, oh, I'm giving this to my granddaughter, and that's great. I'm always just like, I'll kind of double down on things as I'm buying it. Now, these are the things I'm buying. Now, you sure these are the things you want to sell? Do you want to change your mind on anything? Always get it, and people are much more comfortable to refer me to others because I behave that way, and my business partner does, and my dealers do, for the most part as well. They're decent people. That's why they've been with me all these years.
That makes sense for sure. Talking about collections, what are some of the most interesting collections that you came upon? I'm sure there's been some crazy things.
Well, we write about High and his collection of little people, images of little people and little people objects and related collectibles. Oh my gosh, we would for the longest time we would put out a list twice a year to the dealers, and it would be like, this is what people are looking for, because I realized people coming in and telling myself or my staff, oh, I'm looking for this, and we write it down on a little piece of paper, right? But we don't do anything with that little piece of paper. What's that? So like we would make a list. And then when there would be like commonalities, just a lot of people looking for the same thing, right? And I'll put out something like, because I remember this happening, jadeite mixing bowls, those green mixing bowls, right? So, Martha Stewart started collecting those in the 90s, and within an hour and a half, you couldn't buy one. So not that that's odd, but it was just that like, oh, there you could see the trend. I had a gentleman who collected 6-inch advertising rulers. And he was a college professor and a lovely, lovely, lovely person, and had, oh gosh, hundreds of them. And then it turned out that he had been, junking, hitting antique stores, whatever, and he'd found it was a 12-inch advertising ruler for a paint store from his hometown where he grew up. And the printing for the ruler was on the first 6 inches. And so he bought it, and it was just 1 through 6. And then, but they do actually make 6-inch advertising rulers. They made a lot of them. And then he was onto it. And I used to tease him. I said, it's a good thing. And they weren't all, your collection would be twice as heavy. If it was a full 12-inch ruler. But again, going like, and ask about it, but I'm not asking about it and making fun of them, but by any means. I could, who am I to say with all the stuff I collect? But there's a lot of interest in just to the darkness. I mean, things that are just like skull related, and beyond Halloween. Just that kind of well, Marilyn Roth was a good one with having the bat earrings and all that, and skull rings, and that's the 70s, for God's sakes. When a lot of that stuff came out. I had a guy who collected Art Deco dentures, and I would go even here going, I don't even know what that means, right? And he'd go, no, it would be like they're skyscrapers, that not all the teeth are even. I don't know how you get into collecting that. But the ones which I think I mentioned in the book was artificial limbs and railroad timetables.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and I love that because it's just, first off, it's fun to say artificial limbs and railroad timetables, but what is that about? Just what the heck is that about? Where do those things meet in the mind of a human being? I mean, just go there. Right. And then it would be that, because I was at his house and he had all these like old mannequins. Place was just filled with mannequins, which was creepy as heck. And there were some great mannequins there, but it tied into that. He loved having finding those artificial. So it'd be like, someone's half of a leg, or generally there were a lot of half of legs, as I recall. Railroad timetables, I would find them railroad timetables all the time. Pardon, I didn't mean to make that joke. But where those two collide, it's just it fascinates me. Again, I'm not even answering your questions. I'm just positing others because I don't understand it myself. But humans are interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So, you go into these places sometimes at, I guess, more somber moments when people have passed. Do you find, because I feel like there'd be two different sets of people, which one's more often, where you go in and everyone reminisces about these items and everyone wants too much money? Or is it more often that people are like, I just want all this junk gone. I don't care what you give it to me or how much you want to give me for it, just giving things away? What's more common?
The first.
Really?
The first. I was going back and like, what is the motivation behind these things? And the problem is, this is another tip for your listeners, because at some point we're all in this. You got, maybe you're clear out your folks' house or something, and you think you're going to avoid it, but you won't. So the connecting factor here is time, and people do not give themselves enough time. In that, the house sold faster than we thought, and now we got to get rid of all this stuff. Well, this is a process. If you really want to make the most money on it, it's a process. And all the things you need to do, which is take photos and send them out to dealers and get people there, and then have a estate sale, or whatever you're going to do. If you don't do that, this is the last minute. And I get these calls all the time. The condo, the house has to be emptied out by Tuesday morning, and I'm getting this call on a Saturday afternoon. Right? Cannot be done. I can't line up a mover that fast, even if I could. Right? So I get that a lot. So people just didn't take the time to prepare for things, and then they're told you don't make good decisions when you're rushing. Right? You just don't. So it's kind of like another life lesson. The people who have these collections that just think everything's worth $1 million, it's nice to look at them, but I have no problem deflating people's balloons when it comes to that. Because again, I could just pull it up and say, here's the auction records, right? This is what it sold for on this date. There's what very few things that you can't find. There are things that you can't find, but you can still get a ballpark feeling for most everything if you know where to look. So yeah, and honestly, if the situation where like they're just wanting to give me things, I'm really uncomfortable with that. We try to buy things. We want to buy things. We'll buy things because that's somebody that's just desperate then, often. And I just don't. I think that's why I'm still in business. I'd like to think that, because I'm really there to help people out, and also, some people don't want to be helped out. They think they do, but they don't. They're not ready to part with it. A lot of times this will be where, oh my gosh, this was my mother's favorite bedspread. It's that emotion does not connect to the person that I'm going to sell it to. Right. There's no little plastic bag that we could put those emotions into and it goes with it to the next. It doesn't work that way. So that's the other, kind of fascinating part of the business. Your love for something isn't necessarily transferable to the next person.
For sure. I feel that would be a tightrope to walk, where you're the $50 more you want for this because, it was in your family for 50 years. No one cares about that. That's you want to write that down on the back of it. That's not really going to get any more money from me.
Good advice. Now that's a good idea.
There you go.
Good idea. Pin that to that, and then history goes with it.
There you go. Yeah. So I guess the last question I would have in this before we talk about exactly these books is the fun aspect. You talked about that kind of at the end, and about how, obviously a lot of people do this vintage type stuff out of fun and a side thing and all this kind of stuff. But this is your real job. It's not always all fun and games. So talk about some of the, I guess, less idyllic parts of the role.
Well, I think part of that chapter, I think I might mention that it just seems like everybody expects you just to give a free quote on pretty much everything. How about this? How about this? How about and after the third one, and then I'm out, because I'm not here. Can I enjoy my cocktail? Can we watch the game or whatever, So that annoys me, but that's kind of people. But I always say you wouldn't be asking, some other professional person for something for free, basically, because this is what I do. Clearly, I think probably the worst is just, if you're going in there and you're buying things, or trying to buy things, and someone is ill, and they're downsizing into a hospice situation and things like that. And trust me, I mean, here we're going, 100 miles an hour because I want to get as much information into your listeners. But when I'm that, I'm the listener. And I really, really try to get a feel for I ask myself this all the time, to take a pause and go, what's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to do? So like, where are we in this? It's their pace. It's their life. Their life is more important now than ever. So I think those are the more really, and I don't write about that in the book, but those are one of the more delicate, situations. Once someone's gone, you're either dealing with the family that sometimes they care, sometimes they don't care, sometimes they care too much. Right. But again, it's that, it's the time element of kind of how motivated they are to, to buy these things, though that can still be sad. But I kind of look at it as, I often ask, who was this? Tell me about your wife. Where did she work? I start out just there. What did she do? Really, it's what did he do? What did he do? And I do this in some ways to almost diffuse my own uncomfortableness with what we're about to do. And inevitably, they can't wait to tell you about, drunk Uncle Bob and what a hoot he was, especially at parties, and why they and he couldn't keep a job or a wife, these stories, and you're still buying his things, but it kind of brings him back when others talk about him. And I don't mean that in necessarily a paranormal way, but it just brings him back into the room and into the conversation. It makes it easier to buy his things. So it's sad, but I try to make it as this particular part of it as painless as possible.
No, that makes sense. So I want to know what made you write these books. I'm sure there's plenty of people that do what you do. I have not met a ton, so I'm going to say you're probably the funniest at at the job. I'm going to give you that credit. But what made you decide to write this book?
Well, like I said, I started out with unintentionally writing two different books. And then I really didn't know what to do with them. And I thought, well, I actually went online and I was like saying, well, there has to be like a memoir, because it seems like part of it is like a memoir. So there has to be a memoir from an antique dealer. God, everything's been done. And only thing I could find was an antique dealer in the UK in the 70s. He wrote about his adventures, and I couldn't even find a copy of it, but it did exist for a while. And so it was probably, Antique Roadshow, like the origin story, right, of this guy. So that motivated me, because it was like, everything's been done. I've just seen everything. And I give you my perfectly honest answer. So I have a friend of mine who's a composer and a playwright. And I had to learn a word here. I did not know what this word was. So I told him my problem, and he says, well, you need I'm going to say it wrong. You need a dramaturge. A dramaturge. And he goes, that's somebody who comes in and like pulls this all together. Right. And I go, I don't even know what the word is. So how do I find somebody like that? And he goes, I'll do it. So he came over, and I had all these chapters, and we laid them all over the floor, and we mixed them all up. And then we sat down, and we started with the first story, which is Traces of a Man Who Disappeared. And if anybody wants to, you can Google that right now and put in New York Times, Traces of a Man Who Disappeared. And that was published in the New York Times, Hello. And by a fluky story we're not even going to go into, just an impossible thing that happened. And then I went, oh gosh, I'm onto something. I mean, I got something in the freaking New York Times on a lark. And I was like, I have more stories like that. And I realized I'm really not good at fiction. I should write the stories of these things that have happened to me and happened to other dealers. And we combine these two piles into one. And it sounds like we just threw it together and then, went out for a beer, but we didn't. It was, and then went through it again and again and again and again and pulled things out, stories that just didn't fit. He was a bigger fan of the business stories than I was. And I have to say, I've had a number of people really like the business stories. It's kind of like this, you can do this. You can start something, and I wasn't all that young. I was 30. That's not young, but I'm, 63 now. So yeah. And to start with nothing, and to build a business. So a lot of people like that. And it just, if you get the takeaways of even this conversation we're having about little kind of pointers for business. So as much of a business book, kind of at its heart, and then it actually kind of has a heart because I could tell these stories. And so my big fear was that people wouldn't be able to kind of make the connection. But as you read through it, it sort of kind of works. And of course it's had editors and proofreaders and oh my gosh. Because I was very wary about that. But that's how that came to be. The cover scares people. And that I have to put this out here, true story. So that I found that from an Etsy dealer who has that image on a set of dinnerware. Yeah, so you could just buy the plate or the cup. It's called. Give her a shout out. So she's Beat Up Creations. She's an Etsy seller, and she's a fabulous artist. Fabulous, and she gave me permission to use that image, and then we toned it down because trust me, my editors, and for people listening to this, one of the best explanations someone gave me was that it's like a spooky American Gothic, right? Yeah. It's kind of hard to explain, but I wanted I just thought nobody's going to read this book. Who's going to read this? Who's going to read this? Who's going to want to read this book? And you have to get people's attention. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, the fact that there are a couple paranormal stories in there, and they're kind of scary. The image is scary, and then I was blessed with these great blurbs that I received from celebrities and designers, where people were just very, very kind to me, because that was the other. I had an agent for a while, and that was one of her recommendations, was to get people to read this book and give blurbs, and so that was the kind of thing I've learned. And now my second book, same thing. I reached out and got blurbs from people of note.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what the second book is and what people are going to learn from that. Obviously, we focused a lot on the first book, just because that's the only one that I've read so far. I look forward to reading the second one. Tell us what people are going to find there, though.
So the second book is Vintage Confidential. And I didn't want to do Selling Dead People's Thing Part 2. I couldn't figure out a way, even verbally or literally, that I was in. I just didn't want, and it's not me. I just kind of don't repeat myself. I get bored. So, but I wanted to do another book, and it took me quite a while, just because life, COVID, on and on. So it's similar, but it's not paranormal. I would say it's actually sexier in more like a sex positive way. So I think it's more contemporary. I think it's funnier. It's still my experiences and my essays and my stories that are linked together with less of a narrative arc. Yeah. So I wanted to write something that my editor says this is my transition book. So where I'm transitioning, I don't know. It sounds a little disturbing, but I mean, we'll have to see. I was very fortunate with the first, and it hitting was the number one antique and collectible book 3 times on Amazon, USA, and Canada. And it's gotten me onto wonderful podcasts like this and podcasts like Around the World. And I've been interviewed in countless magazines. And the second book is getting a lot of the similar attention. And it'll be kind of interesting to see too if the stories that I like, that touch me, touch others. And I'll put this one in there because I think it'll kind of tie in with that. So there's a story about Raymond Hudd and who I was friends with. And Raymond Hudd was a hat maker and lived to be quite a ripe old age. But he started very young. And so his things actually became collectible. He went to the School of the Art Institute, but he was born on a farm in rural Illinois. And the first hats he made were for these 2 donkeys. And his mother helped him learn to sew. And then he goes to the Art Institute. And at 24, he opens up a store on Oak Street, which was really expensive back then. Crazy that this kid would open up this hat store. What? Right? And the most exclusive part of Chicago. I just do not know how he did it. All these celebrities would buy from him. We can flash forward at Phyllis Diller's estate sale, which is this auction. She had 500 Raymond Hudd hats, right? Because she was one of his biggest fans, and she would sell to he would sell to all these famous people, and we became friends in that he would make all these hats. And this would get a kick out of because I remember part of this. So what he was known for, besides the celebrity thing, was he would do news hats. And I kind of go in my own head to this as very, very Warhol, but this is about the same time Warhol was doing these things. In that, he had an Iran-Contra hat. Okay. Iran-Contra, yeah, right. You actually like that one. He did You're Too Young, but there was the Tylenol poisonings where people were killed with they tampered with packaging. It's a terrible, terrible story that happened in Chicago. He did a Tylenol hat. So, I mean, think about it. This is very, wow. That's kind of out there. I mean, right? So it's arty, it's political, he was something else. And this is just, by that time, he's just, he was in probably, I don't know, he probably in his 70s when I met him, late 60s. So I was a kid. Anyway, he would say, I'm doing an Eiffel Tower hat, and I need 50 Eiffel Towers. But they can't be metal because they'll be too heavy, and they can't be big because they'll tell the proportions off. So they have to be plastic, but they have to be the old plastic, not the new plastic. So that was an example of how we became friends. And the story is that friendship that would go on for years. And very much like Jacob Marley, in that I just wanted people to know about this person who I was in awe of him at the time when I finally figured out who he was. And he tells me a story because we were friends that just broke my heart. That just broke my heart. And it's one of my favorite stories in the book of a missed opportunity, that and how it changed his life. So, and that's called Sorrows of the Mad Hatter. That's a chapter in there. But to this day now, let's go to 2022. Museums have shows about his hats. So and he's not forgotten about. But I think I'm bringing in a very personal story about him that really nobody knows. So again, people and things, right? And his hats are sold on Etsy and eBay. People can look up Raymond Hudd right now and find a Raymond Hudd hat. I think he made 5,000 hats in his lifetime. The thing of it is, too, I'm not interested in hats at all. I was interested in him and what his deal was and his project, and him making hats and how excited he would be about this. And that's what he did for a living. And I found that fascinating. But the hat, I guess it could have been, it could have been almost anything. But I do like writing about people, especially when there's a really important story to be told through the telling of their life. I think where possible, done in an upbeat way.
Right. Right. No, I think that's awesome for sure. And I would, just putting things together. You said he made about 5,000 hats. If Phyllis Stiller's had 500 of them, if she was basically Phyllis Stiller's personal hat maker, she had 10% of his hats, huh?
Right. And yet you go on his walls, and it would be, yeah. I mean, probably made more, but he would make hats just for people too. So privately, but it's another thing you can Google, just to see how, and it's not like it's curious, because it's not like the kind of thing that's going to just influence, fashion, although it does kind of go back to the fact that vintage is a fashion, and again, people collect those just to collect them. They're not wearing them. So it's getting a little dark here. There we go. But I particularly like it. There was a fun chapter to write too. I felt it felt right.
I mean, that doesn't sound like a chapter that's necessarily particularly funny, given what you said about the story that he tells. But if this book is, you said, funnier than the other one, then I'm looking forward to it, because the first one is definitely funny.
Yeah, there's stories that turn funny, or there's stories that start funny, and then there's a couple essays in there that the whole thing is funny. But just like in Selling Dead People's Things, I think there were parts of it you found amusing, and yet it's still in that same kind of genre of what I do.
Absolutely. So how can people find both of these books?
Oh, to find the books?
Yeah.
So of course, Amazon is, you can get both of them. And like I said, Selling Dead People's Things is now an audiobook. I also say support your local independent bookstore, and you can have them order it for you. I actually prefer you to do that if you can't. Both of the books have their own websites. So titleofthebook.com. You can look for me, Duane Scott Cerny, and Vintage Confidential on Instagram. Started a TikTok channel maybe, I don't know, a month or two ago. That's funny, crazy, and kind of allows me to go and share things in a visual way with people. And I'm on a show out of Vermont called Amber LeMay Live, and I'm on that every other Sunday, and we do a antique segment. And that came from doing an appearance or two on their show, and then they were like, "Hey, let's do this." So, I'll use the Warhol line. I'll show up to the opening of a door.
Yeah. Tell us again. You just talked about your social media, your TikTok. How are people going to find that?
Yeah, Facebook. You can look for myself, Duane Scott Cerny, or either title of the book, and Instagram is Vintage Confidential.
Gotcha.
I think and then I would just say Google me, and I'll show up somewhere.
There you go.
Hopefully somewhere appropriate.
Yeah. Well, let's hope so. That would be another interview if we've got to talk about places you're going to show up that's not appropriate. Yeah. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, Jackson, this has been a blast. I so appreciate it.
So that was Duane Scott Cerny. Awesome guy. Really enjoyed speaking with him. It kind of reinvigorated my passion for all things vintage, all things antiques. And I'll tell you, we recorded this about a month ago, and I have been powering through every antique mall in the area, and it's for the better for me, but I don't know if it's better for my wallet. But that's another topic altogether. If you are interested in hearing more from Duane, I highly recommend those books. Really, really funny, really, really interesting. I know you would enjoy those. Go check those out. Both of them have their own website. Those websites are in the show notes. Check him out. Give him a little bit of love there. If you're in the Chicago area, go check out his antique mall. Broadway Antique Mall. So check that out for sure. I need to get up there myself. I'm only couple hours away from Chicago, so that's definitely on my list. But yeah, Duane was an awesome guy. Learned so much from him. I hope you did too. Of course, with us, if you're not already following, go follow us on Instagram, Not Enough Podcast, jacksonhuff.com. Go check that out. On Facebook, Not Enough with Jackson Huff is the page. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple and on Spotify. Really appreciate that. If you're so inclined, leave us a written review on Apple. Appreciate that as well. But thanks for joining me. Sure to be another guest that will fascinate you as well next week. So tune in then. Until then, take it away, Scott.
This has been Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff. Thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next time where we will interview another amazing guest who is sure to make you laugh or make you think. Or, hey, maybe even both. But until then, keep being awesome.